We're going to begin with a little meditation, first of all, just to calm our minds. These come from, across town, through traffic, after having breakfast and so forth. So sit comfortably with your spine straight. It means vertical, erect. Generally in Buddhism, different traditions. Some meditate with the eyes completely open. It's a little bit rare, though there's some Nyingma, some others. Some meditate with the eyes completely closed. That's even more rare. The general advice is that the eyes are slightly open so that some light comes in and you can focus down the sides of your nose, toward the tip of your nose, although that might seem quite burdensome at first. Hands can be joined on just above your lap, thumbs touching. The arms open so that air can pass underneath the, the armpit, keep you awake. Place your attention, your mindfulness on the breathing, on the respiration, which means just watch it in the same way that if I were to say to you right now, listen. You would hear maybe that music class next door, or some piano or something, the buzzing of the lights. You didn't have to make a sound to listen to. So you don't have to control the breathing, you're just watching it. Watch its full cycle. Inhalation, pause, exhalation, pause where it's changing direction, inhalation again. Let go of all other thoughts. If you notice your mind partially thinking of other things or losing your attention to the breathing, bring it back, start again. See if you can be aware just when the direction changes of the respiration from an inhalation to an out-breath, an exhalation, and vice versa. When the exhalation just ends and you begin to withdraw, that moment when it changes, the whole process, including those moments. there's tension in your body, your neck, your shoulders, wherever your legs. When you exhale, imagine breathing out the tension in your body in the form of black smoke. So relax after each exhalation as though you've been relieved of that. Then follow one breath in as though it were going up from your nostrils to the crown of your head, to your throat, to your middle of your chest, what we call the heart chakra, near the spine. And just let your attention dwell there. Try to watch the mental consciousness. Let go of the breathing, let that just go by itself. No need to pay attention to that now, but pay attention to the mental consciousness, the mind and its contents, what it's thinking, emotions, reactions, maybe judgments, maybe inner dialogue. Like sitting at a cafe, an outdoor cafe in Europe, and watching different people go by. Some of them are sitting down at tables around you, some of them are walking around. Different thoughts and images, judgments, plans coursing through your mind like those people in the cafe. Different thoughts in your mind may be enticing enough to draw your attention, and as though you would follow them. You think about something when you plan to do at lunch or later this afternoon, or some memory of yesterday, and you start to think about that. And that thought, that object of your mind, is given some sustenance by your attention. If you deprive the thoughts of attention, if you just ignore them, take your attention away from them, they will subside naturally. So quieting the mind in that way, depriving the thoughts of you're paying attention to them. See if you can observe the moments of spaciousness between the thoughts, where your mind was not engaged in any thought, but a clear, almost luminous quality of the mind that allows thoughts to emerge from it and to absorb back into it. If you can elongate those periods when you're observing the clarity of the mind, that's excellent. That's a good aim. But inevitably other thoughts will come up to distract you. method to deal with them is though turning your back on someone who's right in your face, so to speak. You know, they've just gotten right up close to you, they're talking to you, maybe saying some abusive things or whatever. Just turning away from them. Try to perceive like that. Try to perceive the subjective mind that's observing the object-like thoughts, subject-object. The perceiver rather than that which is being perceived. Clear, unobstructing, luminous, knowing. Even when the thoughts are present, even if the mind is chaotic with thinking and worry and fear, strong desire, lust, what's it called? Attachment, addictive kind of mind. Even at those moments, just taking your attention away from those emotions, which are basically just thoughts within the mind, emotive states, and turning your attention away from the object thought that's as though out there to the subject mind, which is perceiving them, which always has the same constant, clear light nature. In so doing, you deprive the thoughts and emotions of their longevity. They can kind of dissolve back into the spaciousness of the mind. And you get a little bit of idea. This is the object of our investigation this weekend seminar. If you've gotten a glimpse of it, this is what's called the conventional, clear light nature of the mind. Always with us. All the thoughts and worries and plans and expectations are like dreams within this clear light nature. I think I'm very fortunate to have a chance to observe this, to think about it, to meditate on it, because it's said that through this process, going deeper and deeper, one can make the highest realizations, getting familiar with the laboratory of your mind. I have a human life at present. Who knows? Maybe by evening I'll have been reborn in the animal realm if I die. Certainly within, even the youngest of us here, maybe, what would you say, maybe 5 decades youngest, what might live. Some of us might live another decade, maybe some of us less than that. But whatever time we have left, having recognized this opportunity is one of great rarity and value, that is to be able to practice with a clear mind the spiritual path. I think that I'm going to make use of this opportunity this morning, right now. I'm going to put it into practice by paying attention to the teachings on the Mahamudra, the great seal of reality. I'm going to listen as though I was taking instructions from a doctor and delving into the meditations, like taking the medicine, to cure ourselves in a fundamental way, spiritual healing. getting over our anger, attachment, despondency, low self-esteem. Our very strong desires, addictions, lust, anger, resentment. We can conquer them so that they never come back again. But not doing so just so that I can find some peace of mind. Healing ourselves so that we can be better able to help all other beings who, frankly, although we don't recognize it, even strangers and enemies have been our intimate friends, our parents in previous lives. Not once, not twice, numberless times, again and again. We just don't recognize them as friends, sometimes, as parents. For the sake of all living beings who have been our mothers in numberless lifetimes in the past, I'm going to listen to the teachings this morning with the aim of achieving total spiritual healing, what we call enlightenment. Not just free of all faults, but having developed all positive qualities: love, compassion, perseverance, patience, for the sake of all living beings, so that rather than being a problem for them, we can be a beacon of hope. With that aspiration, with that motivation, I'm going to listen to the discourse this morning of Mahamudra. And then bring your attention slowly back to the present. So I think I said hello to everyone. I'm not sure. The lady in the pink shirt. What is your name again? You're Alice? Anna. We came in after. Good to see you, Aunt for the city. You slipped in surreptitiously. Thank you. So, my name is Gelong Tukten Sultram, but that's a tongue twister, so people say, I'll just call you George. That's fine, you can call me Monk George. I've been a Buddhist monk since, I think, since the end of 75, in sort of what we took with Lama Yeshe, my teacher at Kopan Monastery in Nepal, 1975, at the end, what we call intermediate renunciation vows. So we wore robes. We hadn't taken the actual novice vows yet. That following spring in 76, we took some of us took the novice vows with one of the tutors of the Dalai Lama, Khedju Chujang Rinpoche, and Dharamsala. So 76, 86, 96, 206, 216. What are we, almost 220, 64, 44 years monk, something like that. So, not to toot my horn, but you can say, okay, I might know a little bit about Buddhism at that time, because it hasn't gone off and done military service or anything else in that time. So, just from that point of view, maybe you can say, okay, I'll pay attention, maybe I have something to say. We are going to be discussing a particular topic called the Mahamudra, which I mentioned in last night's introductory talk. Indian word, which was not mentioned by the Buddha himself in his teachings. At least we don't see it. Interesting. You might think, well, this is supposed to be profound Buddhist teaching. It seems to have been coined by the Mahasiddhas. Have you heard of the Mahasiddhas? Do you know who the Mahasiddhas are? You do? What does Mahasiddha mean? Or who were the Mahasiddhas?
They were enlightened beings, teachers.
Sometimes teachers, practitioners, maybe not yet enlightened, but by the time they got that title, they had high realizations, or siddhis. I think siddhi refers to the accomplishment of some special insight, so high spiritual qualities. A person who has siddhis is called a siddha, a realized one. So the Mahasiddhas were the Maha is an Indian word, Sanskrit word that means great. Like we say, the Mahayana. Have you heard of that? You kids in the back row there, have you heard of Mahayana? So the teachings of Buddha basically, what traditionally people knew at that time, of the time of the Buddha, were the teachings that he gave to lead beings to a state called nirvana, or moksha. Moksha means liberation. Nirvana, do you know what nirvana, have you heard of nirvana? I think I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure there was an ice cream bar called Nirvana some time ago. It's like the people say, oh man, this is Nirvana. I went to the Channel Islands, it was Nirvana, as though like free of all suffering. Essentially, that's the sense. The Tibetans translated that word into their language. Nirvana is an Indian word, Sanskrit, is Nyanyan Le Deba, which means passed beyond sorrow, the state that's out of the states that we find ourselves in now, which is called samsara. Throw some words in, just to leave some imprint in your mind, don't worry. Samsara means cyclic existence. In Vietnam, the two ladies that came in together, in Vietnam, do you ever use Sanskrit words? Have you heard of samsara? Yeah. In Pali, is same, or is it samsara? Is it sasara or sam?
I think we grew up learning the Sanskrit.
Okay, so not, okay.
We didn't really.
Because there's both Theravada and Mahayana in Vietnam, I know.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. So samsara is an Indian word that existed before the Buddha. People, the Hindu tradition, the Vedic tradition more precisely, conceived of the continual birth, living, death, taking rebirth in a different realm, again, like a big circle, a big wheel, going, always turning. They call this uncontrolled taking of rebirth samsara. At the monastery where I first studied Buddhism in Nepal, called Kopan, in the early days, there were some little, the Western monks and nuns, there were just a few of us, 14 or 20 of us, they had a set of rooms, very small rooms. I think my room was like that, just a cot. And outside there were a set of toilets, one for the guys, one for the girls. And they were written above, Sam and Sarah. It was quite appropriate. Sam, Sarah. So they were the deep drop toilets, there were no running water at that time. So samsara is not like a particular place or state. It's a state of mind that perpetuates you taking rebirth again and again. If one were to achieve a state beyond that sorrow, so you no longer are impelled to take rebirth again and again, you no longer are susceptible to generating emotional responses of attachment and anger and jealousy and sadness and so forth. That state of nirvana can be attained as a human being. So you could be here in this room. For you, this room is not samsara. To you, this is completely blissful, everything you experience. So samsara is not a place. It's this state of mind that perpetuates this, addictive and angry states of mind that we have. Requires constant rehydration. If you're samsara. So the basic teachings at the time of the Buddha were mainly what was obvious to the population, what was most renowned were the teachings to how to achieve nirvana, which the Buddha called the vehicle of the hearers and the vehicle of the solitary realizers, the Shravakayana and the Pratyeka Buddhayana. Maybe some of you have heard those terms, maybe if you haven't, doesn't matter. Mainly is what we usually think of the monks that were around the Buddha at the time that wore the saffron-colored robes. The Buddha was teaching very austere practices. The monks would, at a certain point, at first they were just like Jesus. Remember Jesus said, the first disciples, what did he say? Anyone, Christian background? How did the disciples join? He said, what did he say? Follow me or something, right?
Just come follow me.
Yeah, just come follow me. So the Buddha did something. So, of course, the Buddha was some 500-600 years before Christ, right? So maybe Christ was emulating that training that he might have had in Buddhism at some point. So at first there were no vows of the monks, but then some of them would manifest some naughty behavior, and the Buddha would make some saying, from now on, those who follow me should not do this, and eventually there were 254 different enumerations in different traditions, how many vows of the monks. And so those beings that led that very strict life, they would go for alms in the morning to get their food. They wouldn't have professions to make money like we do today. That is called the Shravakayana and the Pratyeka Buddhayana. At the same time, the Buddha was also giving esoteric teachings, not simply how to achieve one's own nirvana, one's own escape from samsara, from cyclic existence, but to achieve the state that he himself had achieved, which is called bodhi, like enlightenment, the state of enlightenment. Sometimes the state of nirvana is called the hearer's enlightenment or the Pratyeka Buddha's enlightenment, but full enlightenment, samyak Buddha, perfectly complete Buddhahood, could only be achieved by not aiming for your own nirvana to escape from some cyclic existence for yourself, but foregoing that, like in a movie theater, if there's a fire, some people just want to get out, right? Screaming, running for the doors. There's some people that are more compassionate, just by their nature, maybe training and their mom's advice, thinking of others. Oh, someone help this person, even though they might be hurt by the fire, but thinking of others more than themselves. So this kind of the initial thought that impels one not to follow just what the Buddha called his lesser teachings, his lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, but to follow what he called the Mahayana, the great vehicle. In danger of boring some of you with the same joke I've told before that I mentioned. Do you remember the joke? So when I was in Asheville, many years ago, Asheville, North Carolina, giving a course, and one lady was designated driver, and she was a florist who had as her flower delivery truck an old hearse. I think it was a Cadillac hearse. You know what a hearse is? Do you girls know back then? Hearse is what the funeral parlor they used to take the corpses around it. So she was opening the door for the first time for me, and she said, "I call this the Mahayana, the great vehicle." It's long, it's very spacious inside. So the Mahayana is called that because it's not bringing you to the lesser destination. It's a vehicle that's not bringing you to the lesser destination of nirvana, personal salvation, but bringing you to the greater destination of full enlightenment. So the Buddha gave various teachings, more exclusive, mainly to the disciples who had already developed this aspiration to achieve enlightenment. They were called the Mahayana Sutras, Mahayana discourses. Sometimes some of the Hinayana disciples were present. Sometimes, some of the Hinayana disciples may have actually been emanations of the Buddha or Bodhisattvas, pretending to be practicing the Hinayana path, the Shravakayana or Pratika Buddhayana. So among those teachings in the Mahayana path, they basically come into two categories. The teachings on wisdom, the perfection of wisdom. I put it in my left side, because usually from a Buddhist point of view, wisdom is associated with the left, with the female, and the teachings on the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas, method, upaya, and on the right side, associated with the male principle. So to soar to enlightenment, you needed to have a combination of the two, like the two wings of a bird. You need to have wisdom and method. Method means all of the things, understanding karma, having compassion and love, practicing the Bodhisattva's deeds in the world. Wisdom is something that sees the ultimate nature of phenomena, sort of devoid of content, understanding the deep nature of phenomena, their ultimate nature, which is what we're going to be talking about, especially in the Mahamudra. So many, many teachings that the Buddha gave, and great saints afterwards perpetuated those teachings on method and wisdom. The wisdom aspect is considered to be especially important. It was a very special, unique insight of the Buddha to recognize what he called anattama. Have you heard that term? Some of you? You know from Vietnam, it's in Sanskrit. That's Sanskrit, right? You know how it is in Pali? Oh, you don't know anattama? I thought you said you...
Well, I don't know, I don't remember anattama.
Okay. Atma, like Gandhi, one of his epithets was Mahatma, what is it? Mahatma Gandhi, right? Maha Atma, the great soul, the great self, the great being. Atma means self. So in the Vedic traditions, the Hindu, other traditions, even Christianity, we say, oh yeah, the soul exists, right? The soul, eternal. Even some of the great Christian philosophers said there's no need to prove the existence of the soul because it was so obvious. You just look at your own mind, there's a soul there. Buddha's special insight was to say that appearance to your mind that you're believing to be the soul is like a dream, like an illusion, like a reflection in a pond or off the door of the hotel window. It looks like something, but it's empty of that. Could I use that word like that? Empty of that? Like the reflection is empty of being another person. You see someone wearing the same clothes you are, sort of your eye say, wow, look at that, another monk. It's just your own reflection. It was appearing, functions, but it's actually devoid of the importance that you were attributing to it as though it was something findable as another person. So the Buddha's special insight, he called anatma, no self. The prefix a in Sanskrit usually is a negative particle. Like we have different things like what do you say? Uninteresting. Different prefixes that indicate negativity. So in Sanskrit, the main one is a. When the word you're negating begins with a, like atma, the negative particle becomes an, A-N. So an-atma means no self, selfless. The Buddha said, although this thing is appearing, it's devoid of what you think is there. So there is no such self. It doesn't mean that there's no self at all. Remind me of your name.
Brian.
Brian. It's not as though, if you were to realize selflessness, that Brian would no longer exist. Brian exists merely as a designation to these changing parts of Brian that we can localize and call Brian. We often call the 5 aggregates, 5 skandhas, pancha skandha. We say, where's Brian? He's in Washington, or he's in the United States, where? Washington, D.C., where? He's in Fairfax, where? Buddhist Mantra Center, where? In the room. He comes in and says, where's Brian? We point to Brian. But if you're not satisfied, but what's really Brian? Is it his arms, his legs, his head, his brain, his emotions, his intellect? You can't find with any of those parts what Brian himself thinks of as himself, or what we think of as Brian as some kind of findable thing. Brian is just a name we give to those parts. He's empty of the other, of that self that we think can be findable there. It doesn't mean there's no Brian at all, but the way that Brian exists, the way that Gabe exists, the way that Venerable exists, it's very, like a rainbow, very, very subtle. We can't even, we can talk about it in words, but we can't quite imagine what that would be like, because it's so encrusted with our idea of findability, existence from its own side. So the tradition of how to realize that wisdom of selflessness, and the corollary of that, extending it to all phenomena. My treasured iPhone, still have much attachment to my iPhone. It doesn't exist either. It's almost as though there's a certain kind of identity that it has that we can attribute to it as a self, not meaning a person. We say the selflessness of persons, the selflessness of phenomena. In the Mahayana, that's extended beyond just the selflessness of the person. That the methods to realize that were practiced by the Mahasiddhas, these great beings, maybe from a little bit after, a couple hundred years after the Buddha, for several hundred years afterwards, great beings that devoted themselves. They had already developed a renunciation of cyclic existence. They wanted to escape from this. They wanted to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of others. They were looking for some methods to quickly realize the ultimate nature of phenomena, the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of phenomena. And through their study of the Buddhist scriptures and their own practice, they developed this particular method, maybe through psychic communication with the Buddhists, I don't know. They developed these methods that have come to be called the Mahamudra. So, as I mentioned before, Maha means great, right? Like Mahayana, the great vehicle, or Maharaja, a great king, like an emperor. The Mahamudra, the great mudra, or great seal, not the animal, great like something that you attest a document, if you have to stamp it, that certifies that this is fully reconditioned Subaru, stamp, we guarantee this has been checked and so forth. I'm having my Subaru checked right now, realignments, it just came to mind. So what is this great seal? The seal that's being referred to here is emptiness, the nature, the ultimate nature of phenomena. All phenomena, every phenomenon, person or objects or even actions can be called phenomena. Every action, every phenomena has two natures. Its conventional nature and its ultimate nature. Let's see, was it Brian? You remember?
Brian.
So hard to remember. I'm getting old to remember names. I need to have several times refreshed. So there is a conventional Brian, which is not the one that we think of that's encrusted with some kind of real existence, but just the mere name, Brian, conventionally existent. That Brian is inseparable from its ultimate nature. That Brian is its conventional nature. The ultimate nature of Brian is the fact that that Brian, the conventional Brian, is devoid of that superimposition our mind produces, as though there was a real Brian there behind the body and mind. It's called the ultimate nature. It's emptiness, or shunyata. Have you heard that name? Shunyata, that word? Shunya means empty. Shunyata means emptiness, the state of being empty. The word shunya, there's different words in Sanskrit and Indian language for empty. Shunya has a particular use, like say a big balloon or a water bubble. When the parents make the water bubbles, big thing floating. It looks so real. It's sort of light reflecting off of it. And if you touch it, just disappears, right? Like that. Shunya kind of refers to the fact that phenomena have a certain mode of appearing that seems real and findable, substantial, but like a balloon or like a big bubble, there's nothing inside. There's nothing findable there. It's all appearance. Shunya refers to that empty nature. It's not something that has become empty because you meditated on it or thought about it. It was empty all along, but you didn't realize it. Follow? Okay. Like Uncle Charlie walking down the steps at Christmas time dressed as Santa Claus. Do you all know who Santa Claus is? In Vietnam, did you have Santa Claus? You did? Uncle Charlie walking down the steps dressed as Santa. The kids think they see what looks like, it doesn't look like Uncle Charlie's because he's got a white beard and red hat and padding, mom's pillows and everything. And they superimpose upon him, Santa Claus. But actually he's devoid of being Santa Claus, just in appearance, right? A little bit like that. So the Mahasiddhas, their search for how to develop that realization of emptiness quickly, because it can take a long, long time to realize that, but it's one of the most powerful realizations in the Buddhist path. Selflessness of person, selflessness of phenomena, emptiness. This particular method that we're going to be talking about here is called the Mahamudra, the great seal. Mahamudra actually refers to the realization of emptiness, and it also refers to this particular method that can bring about that realization. So in a nutshell, I mentioned last night, just give you sort of this particular text that we're studying we have a translation that Venerable Dundra found for us of what's called the root text, written by what it says here, the first Panchen Lama, Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen, was a great Tibetan guru. Do you know the word guru? You know the word lama? Tibetan word lama? What's the relationship between lama and guru?
Same word.
Pardon?
It means the same.
It means the same thing, right? It's like saying perro, if I'm pronouncing it right, and dog. Is that correct? How do you say it in Spanish? So you say, what's it? Oh, that's a perro. That's not a dog. That's a perro. No, it means the same thing, just different languages, right? So Lama means guru. So he was the first Panchen Lama. It says here, actually he was, it's funny, I told Leslie, he was actually the fourth Panchen Lama. But he was called the first because he was the first one given that name. And his previous 3 reincarnations were called successively the third Panchen Lama, the second Panchen Lama, the first Panchen Lama. But sometimes, because he was the first one to be given the name, sometimes he's called the first Panchen Lama, so you have to be careful. Like in his commentary, he wrote a commentary to this text, an auto-commentary, his own commentary to this root text on the Mahamudra, and that is signed fourth Panchen Lama. So you might think, oh, the first Panchen Lama wrote this, and then 4 reincarnations later wrote the commentary. No, it's the same guy. You know, similar thing with the Dalai Lama. You know, who was the first Dalai Lama given the name Dalai Lama at his time? No. Second, third. What was it? The third Dalai Lama or the fourth? Third Dalai Lama, I think, was the one. Didn't have a title yet. Dalai Lama. He went to, I think he went to somewhere in Mongolia, and one of the Khans, the great king, he was kind of the spiritual preceptor of this very powerful person. There were political reasons also for doing these things. Mongols had great control over Tibet at certain times. So this third Dalai Lama, I believe, one of his names was Gyatso. We had a Mongolian fellow in class the other day, right? He knew this. So a little bit different, a little bit difficult in the Mongolian language to say Gyatso. It usually ends up sounding like chomps or something like that. They can't say so easily. So instead of calling him Gyatso, the Mongolians called him Dalai, which means Gyatso. Gyatso means ocean, vast body of water. Dalai is the Mongolian word for large body of water. So he was the third being, the third incarnation was called the Dalai Lama. So his previous incarnation was called the second, and the first Dalai Lama. Similar to the Panchen Lama. So the names had not been given until a subsequent reincarnation. Even in this lifetime, say if you, as a kid, you're in grade school, you're in high school, you're in college, you go to graduate school, maybe you become a lawyer, a judge, judge, let's say. So you say, oh, Judge Judy, Judge so-and-so, some great being. Then you refer to the child. Well, that was Judge Judy or something. It's not Judge Judy. That name can be attributed to the previous time, right? Okay, so I like that. So the Panchen Lama had received these teachings on the Mahamudra in a sort of whispered lineage. That meant the teachings were not given publicly. They were transmitted from teacher to student in a very private way. They call it ear-whispered lineage, as though they didn't necessarily, you didn't have to come up and stand next to the Lama and he whispers the teachings in your ear, but you were in the room and he just gave it to you or to 2 people or something. There were several teachings like that in Tibetan Buddhism that were considered so rare and so sacred that to just proliferate them publicly might, to lessen their sacredness in the minds of people. So it was he received these teachings that were received by the founder of the Gelugpa tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa, Tsongkhapa. Don't worry if you don't follow all these names. Some of you may know these things, you can make connections later. You may hear these names again. Lama Tsongkhapa was a great Tibetan Lama, spiritual person who started the Gelugpa tradition, the tradition that the Dalai Lama is a member of, one of the 4 great traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. It's said that Lama Tsongkhapa had a direct communication with the Buddhas, could actually, in meditative state, receive teachings and advice, guidance from the actual Buddhas. Right now, we have to depend on the written word and teachers. Sometimes some teachers you might feel might be really close to Buddhahood or actual Buddhas, like the Dalai Lama. Other people, just maybe trying to say the right words. Still, we revere that. So Lama Tsongkhapa actually received teachings, not from ordinary beings, from the actual Buddhas, and that he was instructed, he was given instructions from Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, how to realize the Mahamudra, what the real meaning, what this special meaning of Mahamudra was. It's called the close lineage. Close because the longer lineage came back from the Mahasiddhas. There were other lineages of Mahamudra that were handed down from Sarahat, Tilopa, and other of the Mahasiddhas to their disciples on the Mahamudra. Lama Tsongkhapa received those teachings, what we call the distant lineage, and he also received the short lineage directly from Manjushri. So it's said that these teachings are especially vibrant, especially blessed for that reason. So those teachings were passed down to the subsequently called the first Panchen Lama, second Panchen Lama, third Panchen Lama, fourth Panchen Lama, amongst others. And the fourth Panchen Lama felt the time was right, and he composed this text that is the root text that we're talking about here. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has given teachings on this on many occasions. And one occasion, must have been around 1996, when Alex Berzin translated this root text. This is the first text, sort of like abbreviated text that often in the monastic tradition, Buddhist tradition, people would memorize what's called a root text, like the root of a tree. Root, very brief, sometimes enigmatic, just words piled up. There are many, many texts that the young boys would study. And at first they would just memorize Abhidharma Kosha, Bodhisattva Charya Vatara, these root texts. And then, having understood the words, memorized the words, later when they received teachings, commentaries on those words, it was as though having built, I like this example, having built a stone wall, stone fence to demarcate something, but still can be knocked over. But then the commentary is like putting in the mortar, connecting the stones. If you know the words, the root text, by association, if you receive the commentary, you can somehow remember the meaning of those words, having heard the commentary. Or even remembering the commentary, you can sort of infer back the root words, the root text. So this is called the root text of the Gelugpa Mahamudra. And the commentary that the same Lama wrote on this is called the commentary to the Gelugpa Mahamudra. You can find it, if you're interested to follow that up, you can find that book on Amazon. You look under Dalai Lama Mahamudra. There was a text that this translator, Alex Berzin, helped to edit of the Dalai Lama's teachings on the commentary, the root verse and the commentary and so forth. Also, we're kind of using this text by my teacher, Lama Yeshe. also the teacher of some of the other people that associated with the center. He died some years ago, already 30-some years ago, because his reincarnation was discovered as a little boy in Spain called Lama Osel. And he's already in his 30s, I guess. Do you know, Felicity, how old is he? 33, 35?
I think he'll be 30, I'll be 33 in December. I think he'll be 35 in February.
Okay, so he's 34, late 34, right?
Yeah.
Mid 34. So Lama Yeshe was my teacher. He was the founder of this group of centers around the world called the FPMT. Our Buddhist Mahamudra is a member of that group. And Lama Yeshe taught on the Mahamudra on a couple of occasions, and those teachings were condensed and edited by Rabina, Venerable Rabina, who's been here to teach various times. Maybe some of you have heard of her. So we're going to be using that also because it's very tasty. I feel, having known Lama for many, many years, been very, very, very close, as he talked about the Mahamudra, it was something that he himself had practiced, and it had been some kind of monumental experience in his own spiritual development. It's something because there are various ways, as is mentioned in the text, to approach the subject of realizing emptiness. And I'll quote from page 3 here. This is the first paragraph down from the top, essentially the second paragraph of the page. And so, for this sutra tradition of Mahamudra, I'll explain more what that means in a second. And so for this, out of the two methods, that is to say, seeking a meditative state on top of having gained a correct view of voidness, that's generally how people, they study about emptiness or voidness, selflessness, understand it intellectually, and then try to develop meditation experience of that. That's one. So seeking a meditative state on top of having gained a correct view. So first a correct view, then on top of that seeking a meditative state. The other method is seeking a correct view on top of a meditative state. That is, first having some experience, meditation, sort of, even though it's not actual emptiness, trying to get something similar to that, like through this Mahamudra method, and then on top of that, adding in the correct view of emptiness so that you have an actual deep experience of that. A lot of people, that's the method that's being used here. I shall explain here in accordance with the latter method, that is, seeking a correct view on top of a meditative state. So first having some meditative experience, get some taste of emptiness, and then finally clarifying that through understanding it intellectually, the correct view of emptiness. Many times people study for decades about emptiness, but they never have had a chance to meditate on it, try to put it into experience, so it's still kind of dry to them. So the Mahamudra is something sort of either for another kind of personality or for all of us that want to have some flavor of emptiness now, and then to work through that, to have some meditative experience right from the beginning. So that's what this tradition of the Mahamudra is about. Okay? Any questions so far while I rehydrate? Are you following? Can you understand my English, first of all? My Midwest accent? Is there a Washington accent, TC accent?
There's so many transplants.
Yeah, everyone's transplanted. Yeah. Question? No. Just moving your hair.
Sorry.
Okay. So let me start to read a little bit of this from this translation of the root text. If you're interested, like I said, you could get the Dalai Lama's book on Mahamudra that was translated by Alex Berzin on Amazon, or you could even get the Kindle edition of this book, or you can order the hard copy on Amazon also. You can have it 3 minutes from now if you have your Kindle or your iPhone. You can just purchase. I think it's $11 or something. The nice thing about the Kindle edition is that you can search. You know, you can search for words. Like you see some word later and say, didn't I read about that before? With a paper edition, you have to. The paper edition all has advantages. With a digital version, you can do various things like that. So we're also going to be reading a little bit of Lama Yeshe also. So let me begin. Namo Mahamudraya. That's what the text says. It's in Sanskrit, although it's a Tibetan text. And Namo, you know what Namo means? When you were in India, Ladakh's literally considered part of India, right? People say, what do they say to you nowadays? Namaste. Namaste. Come from the word Namo. Namo means homage. So oftentimes people put their hands at their heart in a spiritual sense. What do we say in the West? Hi. Ciao. Not so spiritual. Probably there's something in the Christian tradition or Jewish tradition or Muslim tradition when you greet someone. Anyone know of some spiritual greetings?
Peace be with you.
Do you say that at the beginning? I thought that's when you'd be leaving or something. Yeah. No, that could be. Peace be
In
with
the middle
you.
of church, that's how you greet your neighbors.
Peace be with you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I stand corrected. Yeah. So you're right. You didn't know that you were right so much. Right? So, Namo or Namaste, in a colloquial, kind of means I'm paying homage to your nature, your universal nature. So it's paying homage to the Mahamudra. The aya at the end is kind of grammatical. It means to the Mahamudra. Pay homage to the Mahamudra. And here in English, he translates it into English. Homage to the Mahamudra, homage to the great seal of reality, the great seal that testifies the ultimate nature of reality. So it begins, I respectfully bow at the feet of my peerless Guru, Lord of that which pervades everywhere, Master of those with actual attainment, who expounds in a denuding manner. I'll have to see how others translate that. Denuding manner, maybe direct manner, without any kind of elaborations, exactly as it is. The diamond-strong Vajrasphere of mind, parted from what can be expressed in speech, separated from, is beyond what can be expressed in speech, inseparable from Mahamudra, the great seal of reality, the all-pervasive nature of everything. Let me read you another translation of that. This is a different translation by a different person in Lama Yeshe's book. I think it was translated by Vola, Greek Tibetan translator, very good girl, fantastic scholar lady. Namo Mahamudraya, homage to Mahamudra, the all-pervasive nature of everything. I bow with respect at the feet of the incomparable Guru, the Lord of Siddhas. Remember, it's sort of like the best of Siddhas, this is referring to Lama Tsongkhapa, who teaches the naked state of reality, the indivisible and inexpressible sphere of the Vajra mind. Gathering together and thoroughly condensing the essence of the oceans of sutras and tantras. It's just poetic, right? When you have the vast number of discourses or sutras and the Buddhist teachings on the esoteric path called tantras, the oceans of sutras. You should think they're written in the water or something. Mm-hmm. Gathering together and thoroughly condensing the essence of the oceans of sutras and tantras, tantras, and the quintessential teachings, I shall write some advice concerning Mahamudra from the Gelug Kagyu tradition of the fatherly Dharma Vajra, a Mahasiddha with supreme actual attainment, and his spiritual sons, or spiritual offspring. So Dharma Vajra was the guru of the fourth Panchen Lama, or some here called the first Panchen Lama. His personal guru was one of the great siddhas who had received the teachings from Lama Tsongkhapa, had actualized them. He's one of the greatest of the lineage, but he did not write a text. This is the first text in the Gelugpa tradition that was written on the Mahamudra. So he's referring to his guru. Usually in India, and especially in Tibetan tradition, and in the Far East, there's a sort of an intuitive understanding of respect for the spiritual guide that we don't have from the beginning. In the West, especially now, with so much worry about corruption, we're always, it's almost like your professor is, we see their foibles. We don't think of their good qualities as outshining their foibles. Oftentimes we think of their faults and idiosyncrasies, or their naughtiness, sometimes if they've been power hungry or money hungry or sexually inappropriate or something, we center on that, and we don't have the same kind of relationship with teachers, especially now. In the Indian Buddhist tradition, and then certainly in China and the Far East and other countries, the tradition of guru devotion was considered to be an essential element in spiritual development. Respect for and devotion to the spiritual teacher, seeing their qualities, seeing them as emissaries of the Buddha. Who knows? Actually, maybe that's the Buddha. You might say to yourself, oh, my personal teacher at the monastery is a very humble guy or gal. They couldn't be the Buddha, It's not like the Dalai Lama or the Panchen Lama or something very high. But if the Buddhas were appearing in the world to us, they could only appear to us according to our karma, what we're capable of perceiving. So sometimes they may appear in a very humble form to lead us on that path. So that's the kind of the mindset of one seeing one's own spiritual guide as the Buddha. Not just a representative of the Buddha, just even going beyond that, if you understand emptiness, this is the Buddha. So the other translation of this verse, having condensed the essence of the ocean of sutra and tantric advice, I will write down the instructions of the Ganden oral tradition of Mahamudra. Here it actually says Genden, which is actually correct. Instead of saying Geluk Kagyu tradition, here it says the instructions of the Genden oral tradition. So Kagyu is taken not as the Kagyu Buddhist tradition, but as meaning oral tradition. Ka-gyu. Ka means speech, oral. Gyu means lineage or tradition. I shall write down the instructions of the Genden oral tradition of the Mahamudra of the Supreme Siddha, Dharma Vajra, and his followers, who give sound instruction. Okay, so that's the beginning. Sort of like all of the, almost all texts that were written in Sanskrit and Buddhist texts that were written in Sanskrit and later in Tibetan always begin with a homage to kind of create, like we paid homage to the Buddha at the beginning, even if it's just mentally, even if you didn't put your hands at your heart, to create some virtue to be successful in the enterprise we're about to do, which was listening to this class or studying and so forth, or writing a text. You would always pay homage at the beginning. And especially here to the Guru, from whom you've received these teachings. that one tries to see as peerless, as like the Buddha. So he says, gathering or having condensed the essence of the ocean of sutra and tantra advice, gathering together thoroughly, condensing the essence of the oceans of sutras and tantras and quintessential teachings, I will write down the instructions of the Gendin oral tradition of Mahamudra. So this is his promise to compose the text. When you engage in some spiritual enterprise, it's said at the beginning, the great beings don't make promises easily, because when they make a promise, they intend to keep it. Unlike us today. Oh yeah, I'll visit you in the hospital. You never go. Or, I'll do this or that. Or like our New Year's resolutions. I'm not going to eat another chocolate chip cookie this year. Or whatever. With the great beings, it said when ordinary beings make promises, it's like writing on the surface of the water. As soon as you write I will, it's already disappeared, right? Doesn't stay. Said that people with some sort of spiritual discipline or resolve or moral resolve is like writing in the sand. But the high beings, the siddhas, the great beings, when they make a promise, it's like engraving in stone. They're not, that's not going to be forgotten. So here, the second paragraph there, having condensed the essence of the ocean of Sutra and Tantra advice, I will write down the instructions of the Gendin oral tradition of Mahamudra, of the Supreme Siddha, my Guru, Dharmavajra, and his followers who give sound instruction. So this is a promise to compose. Here it says, actual words in the text says Gendin. Usually we talk about the Gelugpa tradition. That's how Alex translated it here. Gelug Kagyu. So you know how the evolution in the time of Lama Tsongkhapa, his tradition was not called Gelugpa. Gelug means the virtuous tradition, like the ones who wore the yellow hats, the yellow hat tradition we were joking the other night. Before that, the monastery that he founded was called Ganden, which means Tushita, the virtuous place. It still exists in Tibet, sort of destroyed and rebuilt. Ganden Monastery, that was Lama Tsongkhapa's own personal monastery. Then later Sera and Drabung were created, right? You know this? Ganden was his name. So it was sometimes called the Ganden tradition, but here it's called the Gendin tradition, so it's the virtuous tradition. So, we got a little time here. What did we end at 12:30?
Yeah.
Okay, so, next. Here this text now has outlines, so it's preparation. So I'll read from Alex's translation first and the other so you can see the words a little bit, different ways of translating it become more clear in the newer translation, I think. For this, so for his presentation of the Gelug tradition of the Mahamudra, for this there are the preliminary practices, outlines, the actual methods, and the concluding procedures. Generally in texts, they're divided like this, or some outline is given like that. First, something that you do beforehand, and the actual practice, and then what you do at the end. So here it says, first, preparation. This has three parts: preparation, actual practice, and conclusion. So, preparation. As for the first, preparation, in order to have a gateway for entering the teachings, and a central tent pole for erecting a Mahayana mind, earnestly take safe direction of refuge and develop a bodhicitta aim. Do not have these merely to be words from your mouth. Okay, this is maybe the words sound a little bit awkward in those early days when Alex was translating these for the first time. 96, was that 96, 206, 216, 25 years ago or something. So maybe hear a little more clearly. First, earnestly go for refuge and generate bodhicitta. Since these are the gateway and central pillar of the teachings, and especially the Mahayana, these should not be mere words. So what does that mean? Take refuge and generate bodhicitta. Have you heard of refuge before? Have you guys, and kids in the back? Yeah. What is it? What does refuge mean? No, don't turn to her. She's your, obviously, she's your sage. Okay, now what does refuge mean?
It means like you would go to a safe place. You would leave, like if you feel like you were being threatened or overpowered, you would go someplace that you would feel safe. Right,
obviously that's the word, the meaning of the word refuge in general, the dictionary, but in a Buddhist context, what does it mean at the beginning to take refuge? What do you take? Where do you go, or to whom do you seek refuge in Buddhism?
Do you mean beyond taking refuge within your mind?
Well, in a Buddhist context, it's kind of the defining characteristic of being a Buddhist is one who takes refuge from the depth of their hearts in, where do they seek refuge? Money, fame, being a Lama, a high position. Where do they take refuge? What protects you from a Buddhist perspective? I'll remind you, the Buddha, his teachings, the Dharma, and the spiritual community who are putting those teachings into practice, may not be yet Buddhas, but on the way, the Sangha, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, we take refuge from the depth of our heart. So that means if we analyze what can protect us from suffering in the world, can Tony Robbins protect us from suffering? Maybe you don't know who Tony Robbins is. Anna, do you know who Tony Robbins is? He's some new age, could you call him new age? Maybe he's already been doing this for 30 years. You have to go to his seminars, you pay tens of thousands of dollars for the weekend, and teaches you how to reach your highest potential, but it's all, it's not real saving you from problems, I think, not a spiritual path. Who can protect you from suffering? The various worldly gods and spirits, maybe powerful beings, or politicians. I don't want to mention any names. They can't protect us from suffering. Maybe if we take temporary recourse to them, the local alderman can help you get your street fixed, at least in Chicago. I don't know if you have aldermen here, like the local lowest level of hierarchy of the government. You might take refuge in them because there's something you can reach. But when you get down to it, the gods all are still within cyclic existence, still within samsara. The only one you can rely on is someone who has escaped from cyclic existence out of compassion for others and is, with the omniscient mind, able to lead you out of suffering. So that's the Buddha, the enlightened one. The Dharma refers to the teachings that the Buddhas give. Dhar, the Sanskrit root, means all of the different words related to that come from that etymology, from that root. Basically, it means that which supports. So the Sad Dharma, the holy Dharma that the Buddha taught, is that which supports you from suffering, upholds you from suffering. If you actualize the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, they protect you from suffering. So when we say we take refuge in Dharma, it doesn't mean as sometimes people think, because the Dharma sometimes means the teaching. So you might think, oh, the book. Oh, I take refuge in the book. Like, oh, protect me. There's some value, to put the books on your head and to wrap them up and to, you pay homage to them. There's great value if you understand that the words of those books indicate the realizations to be made, the actual realizations that we can have in our mind, like understanding of impermanence, understanding of the value of love and compassion, the great value of patience, understanding the selflessness of persons and phenomena. All of these are realizations that you can achieve in your mind. When you actualize those understandings in your mind, you are protected from suffering in many ways. So those realizations are the actual Dharma, more clearly the Dharma. The words are what lead you to that. So even that which leads you to the realizations, we pay homage. We wrap the books in silk covers, we put in a high place, we pay homage, we bow to them and so forth. But the real way to take refuge in the Dharma is to recall those teachings when you have some problem. You understand? You understand? You're an old student, I think. Your friend next to you, I forgot her name. She's...
We were sisters.
Oh, you're sisters? Oh, okay. So you know about Dharma also, right?
Yeah.
You've okay. Taking refuge of Dharma. You follow? You've heard this before.
Yeah.
So I've told this story before. When I lived in Beirut, Lebanon many years ago, before I went to the monastery, before I got interested in Buddhism, I was teaching at a high school there, community American school, for snotty kids. Parents were in the embassy or the Arabian, American Arabian Oil Company, Aramco or something like that. All these kind of like wealthy, entitled kids. And I had a friend, he and I rented a house up in Shamloon, above the airport, so we could go away on the weekends. He was studying in a college. He was an American boy, Steve. Later, it turned out that Steve had invited a friend from America called Fireball, that he knew from youth. When I couldn't remember where Fireball came from, I told people later, I said, he's either from North Carolina or South Carolina. I said, with a name like Fireball, he's from South Carolina. So Fireball had kind of gotten Steve into some kind of bad, naughty state. So they experimented one Christmas. They got the local Lebanese hashish. Do you know what hashish is? It's sort of like the essence, of the resin, I think, of the marijuana plant. So they rolled it out like you roll out dough, very, very thin, put it between pieces of aluminum foil, and sent Christmas cards to their friends from Beirut. And that was their experiment. They all went through and weren't stopped. The drug people didn't find. So then they thought, okay, what we're going to do is, because Fireball and Steve had always been interested, for some reason, in carrier pigeons. So they were going to import carrier pigeons back to the States, but they were going to make the cages, the wooden cages, to get a local Muslim carpenter to make laminated wood. So one layer of wood, one layer of hashish, one layer of wood, one layer of hashish. So the whole cage, they figured the smell of the pigeons would keep the security people off. So I heard one day, I didn't know about it. They didn't tell me because I didn't want to get me involved. I was a teacher at the school. So I get a call that's maybe from Steve's lawyer, which he didn't have before. His father had got a lawyer, said he's been arrested. The Muslim carpenter turned them in, thinking there was something suspicious. The Lebanese police got them. Fireball and Steve were in prison. And so I went down to see Steve as soon as I could, maybe the next day in Lebanon. There's a big courtyard where there's these bars where they bring out the prisoners one at a time. You walk up, He'd already looked like he was bruised. He was a very good-looking guy, maybe sexually abused already, you know, in those kind of places. And I said, Steve, how are you? And he recited something that he and I had read many times in some Sufi texts, one of these quintessential things that you find in many spiritual traditions. This may resonate with you. This too will pass. Have you heard something like that? Maybe even those exact words. This too will pass. What is that talking about? Understanding of impermanence. The dharma that protects you from suffering. Having that understanding, you know, rather than grasping, this is intolerable, it'll never end. This too will pass. That had gotten him through up to that point, you know. Eventually we got him out. We didn't, unfortunately, from a Buddhist perspective at that time, my mind had no so great compassion for Fireball. We didn't put any effort into getting him out on bail. Steve was able to leave. I heard later when the uprising, Palestinian uprising, the prisons were, there was sometimes these uprisings, prisons were opened up, and the prisoners escaped. He escaped at that time. I never heard anything more about Fireball. It must be about my age. It could be one of these courses someday. You're talking about me. Fireball. Anyway, so Dharma is what protects you from suffering. So we take refuge in it. That's the actual Dharma. Actually, of Dharma, what Dharma is the actual refuge? Do you know again? Of all the different kind of love, compassion, understanding impermanence, and so forth, what Dharma is, what Dharma teaching or realization is the actual refuge. All of them get you closer to that, but what actually protects you from suffering, ultimately?
Emptiness. Realization of emptiness.
When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, have you heard of the Four Noble Truths? This gives me a chance to remind me of my teacher, Lama Geshe Zopa, who for many years taught us in Wisconsin. Not Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but Geshe Zopa, the old great Lama, who was the guru of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa. He taught about the Four Noble Truths, because his English was always a little bit, as a Tibetan Lama, not completely clear. He'd look and he said, the Four Noble Truths, not tooths. So you might mishear what he said as the Four Noble Truths, or teeth, or tooths. So the Four Noble Truths, what are the last two Noble Truths? Anna, do you know? First two, truth of suffering and truth of cause of suffering. And then?
Cessation. Liberation.
So, liberation, cessation of suffering, and the true path. Truth is the truth of cessation of suffering, and the truth that leads to the cessation of suffering, the path. So those last two are the actual Dharma. True cessation means in meditative equipoise, having realized emptiness, at that moment, if you realized it directly, realize emptiness directly, there are certain afflictions in the mind, attachment, anger, at various stages of your continuing meditation on emptiness, they will have been ceased so that they never arise again. They will have been abandoned. Right now, even with great effort using ordinary methods of meditation, we can subdue some of our afflictions, our anger, our attachment, by meditating on various things. But we can't abandon them so that they'll never come back again. But with meditation on emptiness, which is what Venerable was suggesting at the beginning, you can actually have a cessation. When you have the cessation of any of the delusions, that's the actual refuge. You're free of that. That's where you can take refuge. That's where you can put your hat, so to speak. Also included as an ultimate refuge is the fourth noble truth, the true path. Here, the truth path doesn't mean a particular place you go, pilgrimage or something like that. It's referring to the path of the mind that leads to that realization. So the true path means the meditative state in which you have developed that realization of emptiness. That's called the true path. When you've actually ceased the delusions through that meditative equipoise, that's called the true cessation. So that's the actual Dharma. All these other Dharma teachings lead to that. Like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. Some of you know the text, some of you don't. In the wisdom chapter, in that, he says, all of the teachings before, about generosity, ethics, morality, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, all of them were meant to lead us to this, the wisdom of emptiness. Those are all, methods. Those are also Dharma teachings, but those are not the actual, final, ultimate Dharma, So who is putting these, how can we put these teachings into practice? We can, if we're very assiduous, very intelligent, we can read the teachings of the Buddha or receive teachings from teachers and try to put them into practice ourselves. But generally, we need the support of other beings who are on the path like ourselves, maybe a little bit ahead of us, or maybe much ahead of us, the spiritual community. Like Guhya Samaja Center, the Guhya Samaja community. Some of you have come often, some of you maybe first time, some occasionally. The Sangha, Venerable, do you know the definition of Sangha, what the meaning of Sangha is?
Was it technically, there's two I understand. One is that they have actually realized emptiness, and the second is that there has to be at least 4 ordained.
So we say the representational Sangha, which means just the symbol of the Sangha, are 4 or more fully ordained monks or fully ordained nuns. Meaning, in order to take vows of a monk or nun, you need to have preceptors. And in that ceremony of receiving vows, you need to have at least 4 monks. It could be more, but without that you can't ordain someone. So that's said to be, and as taking the vows is like the first step, morality, which can then allow your mind to be calm, to develop concentration, higher training of concentration, then to develop wisdom. It's said to be the fundamental. So the monks and nuns are sometimes called a representation of the Sangha, spiritual community. Like at the time of the Buddha, the groups, like in the various sutras, Buddha was surrounded by a great congregation of monks and bodhisattvas, or let's say ordained ones, monks and nuns and bodhisattvas. But the actual Sangha doesn't have to be a group. Any individual who has realized emptiness directly, and realized selflessness of persons and phenomena directly, that meaning directly is crucial here. It's not just intellectually understanding or having a flash of insight that goes away, but having penetrated something so you see it so clearly, like seeing the lines in the palm of your hand. Anyone who's realized emptiness directly enters into it's called the Arya Sangha, the community of superior beings. Arya is an Indian word. When the white people came from the Caucasus and 1300 BC, 1500 BC into the northern parts of India and started going down to the Dravidian, the darker skinned people, the white people from the Caucasus who were bringing this new language, which we eventually became Sanskrit and so forth. In their language, Arya meant noble, superior, so they called themselves Arya beings. In the time of the Buddha said, a superior being, an Arya, is not just someone who's white, not someone who's by birth a Brahmin or someone who's got some, physical qualities. Actual superior beings, Arya beings, are those who've realized ultimate truth directly. Basically, we say that we realize the Four Noble Truths directly from the viewpoint of emptiness. So anyone who is an Arya being, who's realized emptiness directly, is a member of the Arya Sangha. That's the actual Sangha, the community of beings who can be relied on. They're not yet Buddha, but as they understand ultimate truth and conventional truth, how they're related, they can be relied on to follow the Buddhist teachings. They can be used to interpret what the Buddha said. This is what he meant. No, that's wrong. What you're thinking is wrong. This should be like this. The Sangha. So at the beginning of our practice of Mahamudra, we have to be a Buddhist to really actualize this. It's, let's say, a scientist or what's the people who study different cultures? Anthropologist or something, you know, I'm just going to investigate this. You can do that, of course. You can study these teachings. But for them to actually take root in your mind, in your heart, you need to be taking refuge in the Buddha. That's why I paid homage to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha at the beginning. Make 3 bows, 3 prostrations. In addition to that, that's the qualification to be recognized as a Buddhist, someone who's so-called entered the Buddhist path, someone who takes refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sincerely from the depth of their heart. But in addition to that, as there are 2 paths, the lesser vehicle path that leads to nirvana, and the great vehicle path, the Mahayana, that leads to enlightenment, you need to have entered, or to have aspiration to enter the Mahayana, the great path, the great vehicle, sorry. How do you do that? How does one enter the Mahayana? By generating a particular state of mind based on compassion for other beings. Already being a Buddhist, recognizing samsara, all of this that we experience is like a dream, lacking essence. Like you know what a plantain tree is? You know the plantain fruit? You girls from Vietnam, do you have plantain in Vietnam? Yeah?
They're like bananas.
Yeah, like bananas, but Anna, do you know plantain? Do you know the tree, plantain tree? If you there's a lot of things coming up, like it looks like leaves or stalks. If you take them away trying to find the essence, what do you get to in the end? Nothing. You keep on taking, like the plantain, like the stalk or whatever, the plantain tree, all phenomena, looks like there's something there. You take away all these things, there's nothing there at the end. They're empty. So understanding the plight of sentient beings, so enamored with these temporary illusions, getting angry, attached, obsessed, so many tears, so much suffering, having compassion for sentient beings, not only the ones who are obviously suffering physical harm, like hell beings or preta beings or animals or people in this life who are obviously suffering, even the rich and famous, as their continuity, there's no real happiness to be had, having compassion for all of them, then figuring what's the best, how can I help them? How can I get them out of that situation? Realizing, as one analyzes again and again in many different ways, the only way that you can really lead them out of samsara is for yourself to have escaped, have reached the highest ability and goal. Otherwise, you're like the blind leading the blind. Right? Maybe if you're you might argue in that. If you're a very skillful blind person, is there anyone here who's visually challenged? I don't mean to. You have to be very careful today. Some people will take offense, saying blind or somehow inferior. Not like that. You might say a very skillful blind person who knows the way can lead the other blind people who haven't gone there before, but not perfectly. There's all sorts of pitfalls. You have to be able to have seen reality directly. Have to be an Arya being. So I must become not only an Arya being, I must become a Buddha to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. I can lead them out of suffering. That particular state of mind that has two goals. One, its ultimate goal is to become enlightened, but the, let's say, attendant motivation, that goal, attendant motivation is out of compassion. I want to achieve enlightenment out of compassion for these beings, the best way that I can help them. What's the story go? Someone, the adage, if you give a man a fish, they have a meal for the day. If you teach a man how to fish, they have food forever, or something like that, you know? So, understanding, a young person thinking, during their life, how can I best help my native people? I could teach them a trade, I could go to baking school, learn how to bake bread, and teach them how to bake bread. They'll have bread. But when the flour is gone and the factory is demolished, the people no longer have any food. Or no, at first you think, I will make bread and I'll give bread to all the people. Or more better, you teach the people how to grow the grain, how to harvest it, how to grind it, make flour, make bread. They'll have, forever. So, quote, forever, So the aspiring bodhisattva sees it's not enough just to help people very nobly as a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, the things that many kind-hearted people try to do this lifetime. That would give people maybe a trade this lifetime, by teaching them, if you're a teacher, or you alleviate their temporary harm. But much more important is to teach them how to escape from cyclic existence. So that state of mind that wants to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings is called bodhicitta. So we begin our practice, maybe even a long time, meditating for many weeks or months on developing heartfelt refuge in bodhicitta. That's called the common preliminaries. Do not have these merely to be words from your mouth. Or as Vola said, these should not be mere words. Then, since seeing the actual nature of mind is indeed dependent upon strengthening the enlightenment-building networks, what does he mean by that? And purifying yourself of the mental obscurations, direct toward your root guru at least 100,000 repetitions of the 100-syllable mantra and as many hundreds of prostrations as possible, made while reciting the admission of downfalls. In addition, make repeated heartfelt requests to your root guru, inseparable from all Buddhas of the 3 times. As Vola translates that. Because seeing the reality of mind, the ultimate nature of mind, depends on amassing the collections and purifying negativity. First recite the 100-syllable mantra at least 100,000 times and do as many hundreds of prostrations as you can while reciting the confession of downfalls. So what is that talking about?
Vajrasattva and the 35 menacing Buddhas and the 35 confessions.
Yeah.
Bodhisattvas.
Mhm. So what is this talking about? This is talking about to realize the nature of the mind, the Mahamudra, requires an incredibly fortunate person. There's some of us, whatever we try, we don't have much luck. We would say that person doesn't have karma from past lives. They didn't create a lot of virtue that can be ripened right now. Unfortunate, not fortunate. So there are certain people who are so fortunate, almost anything they try, they succeed in. So what we have to do at the beginning is to try to accumulate virtuous actions that can be the basis for our realizations, and to purify the negative actions that we've created in the past that still reside in our mind as imprints karmic seeds. Sort of like the old song, accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. What's the next line, you know? None of you will. Don't mess with Mr. In-Between. There's some song from the 40s I remember my mom always used to sing when I was a little kid. She must have liked, it must have been a dance song. Do you know that song? Accentuate the positive. So what we have to do is accumulate positive energy, virtuous karma, such as by making prostrations, paying homage to the Buddha, physically making effort and, you know, reciting their names, which you might think, what does that do? Actually, reciting the names of the Buddhas that made great promises and vows that they themselves would look after those in the future, that even by reciting their names, may it become beneficial to others. Sometimes the lamas, we say that sometimes in dedication prayers, in the future, may even my name, even though someone thinks of me, may it benefit them, even if they think of me in a negative way. You know, they want to kill me or abuse me or insult me or jealous of me. Just thinking of me, may it benefit them. You know, incredible holy mind. So there are various ways to accumulate merit and to purify negative karma. Here it mentions, in terms of purifying negative karma, one of the most powerful ways is to recite a particular mantra. In the tantric tradition, the mantra of Vajrasattva. Have you heard of that? Oh, a couple people nodded. Anyone who hasn't heard of Vajrasattva before? Felicity? Oh, I thought you've heard of Vajrasattva, yeah. You're the director of the center. Oh, gosh. You probably led Vajrasattva retreats, right? So Vajrasattva is a completely manifestation of a Buddha, of the Buddha, completely white color, like pure. Even the ornaments, like a worldly god, white, like pearl and everything white. And sometimes embracing a consort, sometimes not. But reciting the mantra, imagining nectar and light coming down into you. If you understand emptiness a little bit, you have a much better understanding of how this can affect us. Imagine that white nectar and light coming and purging you of all the black energy within you. Sometimes we just feel, I'm a bad guy, I'm a bad gal, I've been naughty, I'm low quality or whatever. It helps psychologically, but also in a sense of actually purifying negative karma, reciting the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. And then also to accumulate merit, to prostrate to the Buddhas, especially while reciting the confession of downfalls, which is called the Bodhisattva's Confessions of Downfalls. It actually occurs, this confession of downfalls occurs in a particular sutra the Buddha gave. I can't remember the name of the whole sutra. It's got many, many chapters. What's the name of the whole sutra? Is it the something Vyuha, Kanda Vyuha Sutra, something? One of the chapters is what's called the Sutra of the Three Heaps. So this whole big discourse the Buddha gave has many different episodes, so to speak. One of the episodes or chapters is called the Sutra of the Three Heaps, Triskanda Sutra. Have you heard of that before, the Sutra of the Three Heaps? Yeah? So what is that? What is the Sutra of the Three Heaps? You've heard of it, but you can't quite remember. You've heard it. Like someone would say, yeah, I've heard of nuclear fusion, but don't ask me to explain it to you. I've heard of the Sutra of the Three Heaps. So in this discourse, one of the Buddha's disciples, I think it's Upali, who when the Buddha became enlightened, many of the people of the royal court, his family members and other people, heard about this and they go, wow, the guy we knew is now enlightened, revered by the kings all over. I'm going to go and become his disciple. So they came, one particular group that included Ananda, who eventually became his attendant, Devadatta, the naughty guy who caused so much problem, several other great beings of the court who became his prominent disciples. They came and they brought the barber along. We went to the stupa where Buddha had first cut off his hair, on his quest for, to give up his princehood. He gave his hair, jewels he gave to his charioteer to take back. So they brought the barber along. They were going to do the same thing. They were going to cut off their hair like the Buddha had done, give all their stuff to the barber to take back to the palace. But the barber was very clever, Upali. He said, he wanted to go too, but they didn't. He was nothing. He was the barber, right? You know what I mean? Like sort of almost like untouchable. So he said, I can't do that because if I bring back your jewels and things, before I even get to the gates, they will kill me thinking I've assassinated you, I've stolen your things. So I have to go along with you. And they thought about it and said, oh yeah, you can be our servant along the way, right? Still demeaning, So they get to meet the Buddha. The Buddha agrees to ordain all these people. But in the Buddhist tradition, when monks and nuns are ordained, the seniority of seniority is very important. Who is ordained first? So of that group of people, the Buddha ordained Upali first. So that meant all the rest of them always had to give, if there's food to be given, Upali is served first. If there's a seat to be taken, Upali gets the first seat, like that. So, good comeuppance. So Upali was renowned as foremost among the disciples of Buddha in the understanding of ethics. Just as Shariputra, remember the other day when we talked about the Heart Sutra, Shariputra was foremost in what?
Wisdom.
Right? Eric, do you remember? Is Eric?
Theravada, yes.
Yeah.
Theravada.
And of the hearers and solitary realizers, he was considered to be foremost in wisdom. That's why he asked Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, how did the Bodhisattvas practice their perfection of wisdom? Kind of implying, I know how in the hearer's vehicle, how we practice wisdom, but what are you guys doing? So here, Upali, the Sutra of the Three Heaps, begins by Upali in the presence of the Buddha I think he's asking the Buddha, how do the Bodhisattvas practice, how do they purify their morality, their negativities? Because I know how we do in the Sangha, we do the bi-monthly confession to purify our broken vows, monastic vows and so forth, our main morality. But what do the Bodhisattvas do? The Buddha, I think he addressed him to the Bodhisattva, I'm not sure, I think it's Manjushri. And Manjushri then, or the Buddha, I'm not sure who, I think maybe it's the Buddha. The Buddha says, maybe it's not Manjushri, the Buddha says, Upali, the way that they do is like this. They confess their bodhisattva downfalls. So within that Sutra of the Three Heaps is actually the confession of bodhisattva downfalls, what we call the confession of the 35 Buddhas. By reciting the names of these 35 Buddhas of the past who made vows that by reciting their names would help to purify negative karma, they attained enlightenment. There's some validity to that. Just reciting their names is very purifying. And while one recites that and the liturgy that comes afterwards, I, named George, Bhikshu, Tupten Soljin, since beginningless time, have created negative karma and cyclic existence due to the, some liturgy confessing negativities, rejoicing in the virtues that one has created in the Bodhisattva path, even little ones, and dedicating all the merits at the end to unsurpassable enlightenment. Three different things that are covered. Three heaps. The Sutra of the Three Heaps is talking about this method, which embedded in there is the confession of the Bodhisattva's downfalls. So the Sutra of the Three Heaps, Felicity, is bigger than just the confession. Sometimes that confession is called the Sutra of the Three Heaps, but the actual sutra's a little bit bigger, and that's just one chapter of a bigger discourse, Mahayana discourse, I think the chapter on morality. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because it's time for lunch, on a couple minutes over, and we will, it's about, let me check, 12:33. So we're going to do a very short, like, dedication on the back of a horse, on the back of a yak. Remember I said before that sometimes when the lamas came to a village and they didn't, someone said, oh, please consecrate my tanka, my image, and someone said, bless my mala. The lamas were on the back of a yak, you know, a yak, the big animal. And they didn't even get off the yak. They had to have some ceremony they could do. They memorized, very short. So they take some rice and they say some prayers and they say consecration on the back of a yak. So it's something very, very short. So we're going to do a very short dedication of merit. Just remembering, calm your mind. Remember that this morning we have created virtuous actions that will ripen within cyclic existence as something pleasurable. Try to direct those so that they will only ripen in ways that enhance our spiritual development for the benefit of others. May they not ripen in some transitory happiness or special ability or beauty that would just cause my delusions to rise, but in whatever way they ripen, may they be the fertilization for my further spiritual development, for the welfare of all sentient beings.